What I did know and what the general thesis was and the philosophy of Night Media is like, I knew that not only was the attention going to these creators, but I knew that they would eventually become larger than just a singular channel. Like these were actually going to turn into entertainment and media entities. And now we've seen it with Mr. Beast. We've seen it with and Mythical is a good example of like multiple channels. You have your merchandise, you have your licensing, you have your consumer packaged goods. Like I knew that was eventually coming because I'd seen people like Rooster Teeth at the forefront, like working on this stuff. And I was like, okay, they have a massive merchandise business. Like they're doing like studio shows with, at the time it was called YouTube Red. So I could see all this stuff happening. And I was like, there's no way this is ending. I was like, I think we're like just at the beginning and I want to double down. Like I want to figure out how I like leverage myself into some of these like bigger conversations with these bigger content creators. And that's when like my head started spinning around Night Media. And that's kind of where we are today, is like really the same thesis. Like I believe that a Mr. Beast is actually a multimedia company. He's not a just channel that people see with 50 million subscribers. And, you know, when Jimmy decides to stop posting, when he has 500 million subscribers, he's also going to have 9 companies that he's built that probably span across software, consumer products. We're working on a few crazy things. I mean, you guys, like, people probably saw Mr. Beast Burger. That was something we wanted to test with in the virtual dining space. It's like sky's the limit with creators right now. And I don't even think we've rounded first base. Like we're still so early.
What's up, everyone? This is episode 5, and today we are talking the business side of Reed Duchscher, the CEO of Night Media. So Night Media is a talent management company for the largest creators on the internet. People like Mr. Beast, aka Jimmy Donaldson, who has 55 million subscribers on YouTube, Preston, 17 million subs. They represent 22 creators in total. But what's interesting about Reed and the company he's building is they have much bigger aspirations than talent management. They have an owned and operated division, which launched Mr. Beast Burgers to more than 400 kitchens, Finger on the App 2, which is a competition where people literally have to keep their finger on their phone screen the longest. Over 1 million people played simultaneously. And just last week, they announced a $20 million venture capital fund. But before we got into all that, we talked about Reed's own career, from NFL agent to Dude Perfect to Mr. Beast. I mean, I still have trouble understanding how a guy who represented NFL players is now standing next to one of the largest YouTube creators in the world. Okay, that's the quick introduction. Before we jump back in, please make sure to rate and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, absolutely smash that like button. All of this means a ton. All right, back to the episode.
Yo, thanks for having me. I know we've been trying to plan this for a few weeks, so I'm glad we could get this done.
You're a busy man.
I've become a busy man. I remember like 3-4 years ago, I was talking to my sister and I used to tell her, I'm like, man, I just want to be busy. Like, I just want to have stuff going on. Like I was like grinding to get into like the sports agency world at the time. And now to today, like running phone calls and meetings from 8:30 a.m. to 10 o'clock at night. It gets old quick. Like I love the grind. Like I love what I do. It's just like my brain power slowly diminishes to the end. By the time I hit the end of the day and like I maybe log on to play a game of League of Legends, I am completely shot.
Yeah. I mean that, and then trying to manage, like, you get texts, you get DMs, you get emails, like all the various ways you're getting information now, and trying to manage all that is just, for at least for me personally, really, really tough.
Mm-hmm. I actually just ignore my email. I that's like the one place I don't spend a ton of time. Telegram, Twitter, Instagram, DMs, and phone calls. That's like most of how people get a hold of me. If they send me an email, it just falls into like this bottomless pit. So hopefully someone gets to it.
So let's explain to the audience, if they somehow don't know who you are, why Reed is so busy.
Yeah. So just to back up a little bit, I was an NFL sports agent and I ended up learning about YouTube pretty early on. And one of those YouTube groups happened to be Dude Perfect. And they were on the rise in 2015 when I started to really dig into this space. And I saw, an opportunity to start a business, and I started Night Media shortly after and started signing these like gamers that were playing on Twitch and then all of a sudden on YouTube gaming, which is now larger than life. And I started working with a few of them, and I met someone called Mr. Beast in 2018. If you haven't heard of him, he makes crazy YouTube videos, and he gives away large sums of money, and he's closing in on 55 million subscribers. And it's crazy to say this, but when I met him in January of 2018, I believe he had 1.7 million subscribers at the time. And the introduction was through a Twitter DM, and it was basically, hey, this guy's really similar to Dude Perfect. I think you two should meet. That was the message I got. And I was like, okay. And I looked at his channel, and the first video I saw was watching It's Everyday Bro for 24 hours or something. And I was like, what is this? Yeah. And I got on the phone with him, and he sold me. He sold me on his vision. He sold me on where he thought YouTube was headed. And we started working together in February of 2018, and we crossed that year at 13.6 million subscribers.
So there's so much to unpack there, because it just doesn't make sense how you went from NFL agent to Dude Perfect, who, I mean, if you're going to hop off and jump on another train, like that is a great talent to ride, to Mr. Beast, which is now arguably the biggest YouTuber in the world. Like that just,
I got lucky. Yeah. I got to work with two massive talent, content businesses. I mean, Dude Perfect was still early on when I met them. It was like around 2 to 3 million subscribers. And I think for me, like the telling thing when I looked at their channel and when I started digging into YouTube, I was asking my cousins who were then like 8, 9, 10 years old. And we worked with some pretty cool and polarizing NFL players, Marcus Allen, Tim Brown, Joe Theismann, Barry Sanders, like some pretty crazy guys. And I would ask my cousins, I'd be like, yo.
And this was your dream, right? You were, yeah. Because I had the same dream. I didn't even get that far, right? I got to be like the agent's person when JaVale McGee needed a coffee. Ian was the guy who got JaVale McGee a coffee, and then made sure the lift I got him was a Lift XL, so it would fit like the rest of his body. So your dream, you're an NFL agent, you've made it, and then now you're talking with your cousins about YouTubers.
Hey, I had to do the same stuff, riding the cars. I did a lot of client services at that sports agency. So we both saw Jerry Maguire. Like, we loved that movie. I wanted to be like Jerry. Like, I wanted to be in that world. I also played sports in college, so I knew guys that played in the NFL. And I worked so hard to get a job as a sports agent. And then to get that opportunity, and then to find, YouTube and Dude Perfect, and then to explain to my parents why I was leaving that sports agency to go work with this YouTube group. And they were like, wait, what? How do they make money? Like, what's a YouTuber? Right? They had no understanding, but they understood like what a sports agent was. They had seen Jerry Maguire. My mom and dad just couldn't wrap their head around it at the time. And I left, and I packed my car up and drove to Dallas just on like a whim of like, yeah, my cousins love these guys, and I think this is where the attention of the youth is going. That was like my theory originally, is like, this is where the attention's going. Not that the NFL is losing attention. I just think like there's going to be more YouTube channels that pop up, and these kids are going to continually flood to this platform. And that was like my thesis. And I want to be at the center of that. And I left.
So 2 things. First of all, what is the email to Dude Perfect, or the text message to Dude Perfect says, I should now represent you? Like, I've never done anything in the YouTube world. Obviously they're going to hold the fact that you have this NFL experience in high regard, but what does that like pitch look like?
Yeah, that wasn't even the pitch. The pitch was, I sent their email on their YouTube channel. I just pinged that email, and I was like, hey, Barry Sanders loves your stuff. Nice. Is there any world that we could do a collaboration? And that was like door open. And I didn't even think about like, hey, maybe I should work with these guys. At the time, I was like, those videos are insane. I want to do something with them. Maybe we can fit Barry Sanders in. That was my only thought. And then I started to like get to know the guys, and I was like, okay, they have a much bigger business here. This isn't just like a random YouTube channel. And so that's when I started like actually digging into this whole industry.
And then the second question is, but what is your boss when you walk into the room and you're like, boss, I've worked my entire life for this. You put your neck out for me. I'm working for you. We're doing well, but I'm going to go work for a YouTube group called Dude Perfect.
He was shocked. He thought it was a massive mistake. I think he's like, you wanted to be a sports agent. What are you doing? Like, this makes no sense. they didn't really see the value in content creators and digital influencers. And this was still like, yes, people use Twitter and Instagram, but at the time, like early 2015, it wasn't like so widely accepted yet where it's like everyone was on it.
Right.
And so they were like, they understood their business model of like doing sponsorship deals and contract work, and they just didn't understand. And so, yeah, it was like a kind of a head scratcher, I think.
And there was obviously a moment when you're sitting in next to Dude Perfect and like, you're like, did I make the right decision?
Yeah, I probably asked that question for about a year and a half after I left. Is like, I didn't really make a ton of money. Like I was helping them out with sponsorship stuff. Like there was a lot of interest, but there wasn't a lot of like people saying, okay, we have the budget, let's do it. A lot of like the first 6 months was just a lot of conversations and education. It was
Right.
like a lot of these massive advertising agencies. Like you worked at Wasserman, like Wasserman had no idea who they were. I remember at the time, like Wasserman had like MasterCard, or it's some credit card company that they had on the Amex. There you go. And I remember talking with someone over there, and they were basically like, yeah, we don't get it. Like Amex will never go for this. And so it's just a lot of educating on like why people should act, or why brands should actually be spending money directly with YouTube channels, not just advertising before their YouTube channels. Why should they go and directly sponsor these individuals?
Right. I think the learning curve is still there. That Wasserman example, not only do you have to educate Wasserman, Wasserman then needs to play that game of telephone with the brand and say that you should do this. At that point, there's like 4 different risk factors they've introduced. They're nervous. And just like that level of education is just really, really tough.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I used to do, and I started working with Dude Perfect while I was at this sports agency. And a lot of the guys in the office, I think, were like, what's he doing? And I would travel to New York and LA, and I would set up these agency meetings with Chiat Day and, Barnes and Marsteller. And like, I would go into these pitch meetings, and thankfully I was able to get people in the conference room. And some of these meetings, I would get like 10, 12 people in the conference room as I started to gain momentum having this conversation. And I would just like tell the story of like digital creators and like where I think this is going and how they can be at the forefront of it. And a lot of the times people are like, this is amazing, but like not for us. But some of the agencies, I will say, were very receptive, and they were like, wow, we need to start taking this to our brands that we represent. And lo and behold, 3 to 4 months later, I would get calls from those agencies and they would have budget. And that's when the ball started rolling.
So the ball starts rolling, and then at some point you leave Dude Perfect and you go start your own thing, right?
Yeah, it was just like at a point where I was like, I think there's a bigger opportunity here to actually work with multiple creators, starting my own business. I didn't know if that was going to be a management company yet. I didn't know if it was going to be like me facilitating influencer marketing services, like, working with Honey and then taking a budget and spreading it out throughout influencers. At the time, I didn't really know. What I did know, and what the general thesis was, and the philosophy of Night Media is like, I knew that not only was the attention going to these creators, but I knew that they would eventually become larger than just a singular channel. Like these were actually going to turn into entertainment and media entities. And now we've seen it with Mr. Beast. We've seen it with like, and Mythical is a good example of like multiple channels. You have your merchandise, you have your licensing, you have your consumer packaged goods. Like I knew that was eventually coming because I'd seen people like Rooster Teeth at the forefront, like working on this stuff. And I was like, okay, they have a massive merchandise business. Like they're doing like studio shows with, at the time it was called YouTube Red. So I could see all this stuff happening. And I was like, there's no way this is ending. I was like, I think we're like just at the beginning, and I want to double down. Like I want to figure out how I like leverage myself into some of these like bigger conversations with these bigger content creators. And that's when like my head started spinning around Night Media. And that's kind of where we are today, is like really the same thesis. Like I believe that a Mr. Beast is actually a multimedia company. He's not a just channel that people see with 50 million subscribers. And, when Jimmy decides to stop posting, when he has 500 million subscribers, he's also going to have 9 companies that he's built that probably span across software, consumer products. We're working on a few crazy things. I mean, you guys, like, people probably saw Mr. Beast Burger. That was something we wanted to test with in the virtual dining space. It's like sky's the limit with creators right now. And I don't even think we've rounded first base. Like we're still so early.
I mean, what do you think you have, or Night Media has, that like the WMEs, the CAAs, or even the other influencer talent agencies don't get?
I think they're starting to get it. We definitely have a really deep understanding of what content creators need and what content creators specifically should build their businesses like. We now have multiple creators that have over 25 internal employees. Like they have their own production companies internally, and then we kind of act as that, and we kind of say like we act as like your external COO is like our goal with Night Media, and with that. That ranges from a lot of things, from like operational planning to budgeting to potential hiring, all the way into like the stuff that is at the top, like sponsorships and brand deals and appearances. And then we really get into like this owned and operated part where I see a lot of value is like in the Mr. Beast burger stuff and we'll launch a consumer packaged goods brand pretty quick here with a creator. Like we're going to get really heavily into owned and operated. And that's where I see the real value. It's not so much in the just transactional work, like that does keep the lights on, and it's great to have that services business, but the real value in Night Media, and to me the real value in talent management, is actually not in the transactional work. It's being involved in all these other auxiliary businesses that come along with like representing the biggest creators in the world.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, you said you have multiple people with 25
plus employees. Yeah.
That's nuts.
Crazy, right? And we only represent 15 people. Like it's not like we have 1,000 clients, and we never will. It's not our business model. I mean, we have like what is a Night Media creator?
I was about to ask.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever shared this with someone. Like, what is a Night Media creator? We have like our 5 criteria. I'll give you a few. I'm not going to give you all 5. Maybe that's for a later date or when I write a book on this. But some of our criteria, and one is like we need to have some kind of longevity. We like to look at creators in interesting niches, and so I think a good example, like in like an interesting growing niche, is like arts and crafts. A channel to look at in that space is like a Mariah Elizabeth, who's like at the forefront of like this customization arts and crafts space. She's the biggest female in that space. And we think it's only going to continue to grow. Same thing with kind of like the ZHC. They're kind of in that same space where this like genre of content didn't really exist a couple years ago. So that's one thing we look at. Another thing I spend a lot of time on with creators, and we say we don't sign creators, we sign entrepreneurs. And so a lot of times when we're like looking at, signing someone, we want to see how their mind works. We want to see that they're thinking outside of just, how do I make content? Like we want them to understand, like there's a much bigger opportunity here than just you filming videos. We want to help you understand what those opportunities are, but we need them to be very entrepreneurial minded. So those are like probably like 2 of my things that I really focus on. And then we have 5 other criteria that I'll get into the other 3 probably down the road after, probably a couple of years. But yeah, so those are 2 of our 5 that we really look at for creators.
So what's interesting to me there is like I don't know if other talent agencies are approaching it kind of almost like an investment. In this case, you believe arts and craft is a massively growing field with a big addressable market, and you're trying to find what creator is at the top of that market versus other management companies I've seen focus on one genre. Like let's say we're going to own female lifestyle.
Yeah.
AKA we're going to email Ian when Coachella happens, and I'm going to get a roster list and they all want to go to Coachella. And I
can only imagine some of the emails you used to get.
Oh my God. Coachella is that's like the best, but the worst at the same time. You guys are really methodical and intentional about how you go about it. Whereas you see other YouTubers where it's like, it's different where, you know what I'm trying to say? Where like, they almost are like, they aren't maybe entrepreneurs. They are focused on, this is my craft and I want to make the video as beautiful to me as possible, but I don't really care as much if it gets 30 million views.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, all our creators are really focused on, their craft and making their videos as perfect as possible. And the people that we represent, like they're so open to doing things outside of just making videos or making TikToks. And that's what, we've been able to find. And those are the creators we've been able to work with, is the ones that they understand there's a massive opportunity in front of them. And it's not just on the content end making money off AdSense. And that's like, I think that's why we've found a lot of success. And I knew that, like when I met Jimmy in 2018, he knew this already. He not only knew he was going to be at 10 million subscribers by the end of that year, which was kind of like an inside joke that him and I had. I was like, okay, show me. Like, if you think you're going to be at 10 million by the end of the year, it's 9 million in the next 10 months. Show me. And he hit 13 million. He already understood that the value is so much bigger than just the videos. Like, he understood that the value is actually in access as well. Like, if you're the biggest creator in the world or one of the biggest creators in the world, you get access to all this stuff, whether it's like angel investing or the opportunity to do like finger on the app with Mischief. Like, it's really an access game is what it comes down to. And then you have to be like, in my position, you have to be you have to have such tunnel vision because there's so much noise, and you just have to really focus on like, where do I see the best bang for my buck in terms of my time of what we need to execute on to be successful. And Jimmy already had that. Like, he already had that like tunnel vision when I met him in 2018.
In my limited interactions with him, he's just someone who he sees the future and he just relentlessly pursues it. And you don't always get that from talent. Part of your thesis is trying to find those people who are relentlessly driven to those goals. So when you say, so a traditional agency, you'd say would be much more focused on that transactional relationship, right? And you guys are trying to expand out that with owned and operated and then now investing.
Yeah. It's also more risky, right? I think the transactional management or agency model has worked for 50 years. It's a proven business model. For the most part, it should be low overhead. It should be mostly a cash business, and it should do incredibly well. I think the risk is when you maybe take equity positions or now you start investing off the balance sheet in things you believe in. That's where the long-term value is, but it's also incredibly risky for a management company or an agency who's probably making a lot of money and their partners are, making 7 figures a year. It's incredibly risky for them to be like, you know what, let's take a small salary, invest back into these other entities that we want to start with our talent. Right. I think that's why we've also seen a little bit of hesitation in that. And also you need to find the right talent. There's like 2 things. Like, it's really hard to find the right talent that's like willing to put time and effort into these other businesses that you want to launch with them.
So what I hear is like, that is your moat, is in that the big agencies don't want to, that is a riskier, more long-term game that's going to disrupt. If I'm making 7 figures a year and one of my clients, Mr. Beast, wants to invest in, Beast Burgers, and that's going to cost money, I'm going to say, I don't know if I really want to deal with that. Whereas you guys are willing to play that game.
100%. Like, we'll write the check, we'll invest with them. Like, I know you wanted to get in this too, is like, what's like a talent management firm look like in 2028, right? And to me, like, what I think a management firm looks like, or a multimedia firm, whatever you want to call it, is like, you have 3 pillars to this business. And this is really how you service digital creators. Because the old model of like what an agent at WME or CA, it's really broken. And to me, it doesn't really fully serve what a digital creator needs. And so for us, it's like, yes, talent management's at the core. And on one side is like, you need that talent management at the core. You need to get in the weeds as a talent manager. Like, you need to understand like, what makes this creator tick? Like, what kind of people do I need to surround them with to be successful? Like, all these pillars, right? So like, how do you be a good talent manager? That next pillar for us is owned and operated. And I think there's a lot of value to be had in creators owning businesses and starting businesses. And we've already seen this with a few really good examples. And for us, like, we'll continue to announce more things in the next coming like 12 to 18 months around owned and operated. And then that last one, which I've also found really interesting and I've dabbled in the last 12 months, is really like the venture angel investing. And what I said earlier is like, being a talent manager and representing big talent, it's an access game. And with that access, we've found that we get access to a lot of these deals, a lot of these emerging companies that we can not only provide value to with like a single tweet, but we also want to be on their cap table, and we also want to invest in those companies. And so to me, like, that's what a talent management firm looks like over the course of the next like decade. It's like talent management mixed with like a venture studio, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And for me, when I think first with the owned and operated is, you've kind of see this progression amongst talent where it went from merch to, I'd say, like skincare maybe. And then now we're kind of getting into food with Beast Burgers, but also not food, but Chamberlain's Coffee. You kind of are going down this progression, and then software. And so like, when you think of new categories for Jimmy, but also other talent, like there has to be other categories other than just merch and food, right?
Yeah, there's a ton. I mean, we're working on a bunch right now. I think the
Any
biggest
you want to
opportunity.
release on the show?
I can't. I'm gonna get yelled at. Yeah, I think for us, like, we understand the biggest opportunity is in software, no question. We do think there's a big opportunity in virtual dining, but I think for us, like, we really think the biggest opportunities in software. People saw a little bit of this with like Finger on the App. We'll do Finger on the App 2. We have a few more games in development right now. So that's one thing that we're focused on with Jimmy and a few of our other clients. We'll get into the food.
Finger on the App too now, right? Like before,
it's owned through a different entity. But we did it, just to explain how it worked, is we did it through we did it in collaboration with a company called Mischief, which, if you're not familiar with Mischief, they're amazing and you need to like follow their drops. And the one that's probably the one that stands out to me is like they sold this thing called the Jesus shoe, which had like holy water and like a Nike, was it like a Nike Air Force One? I can't remember what it was.
It was like it had like the bubble at the bottom, but I think they're the smartest marketers, like most clever marketers in marketing, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're amazing. Some of the things that they've launched over the last year and a half have been awesome. And they approached us to do some business together. We wanted to do this thing where, we wanted to do a last to leave, but allow everyone in America to compete. And that's what Finger on the App was. And so we ended up doing it with them for version 1. And then we ended up taking all the ownership of the IP and everything around Finger on the App, which was pre-negotiated, into this other entity. And now with this other entity, which is called Beast Games, like, we're creating all these other things that we'll come out with this year and next year. And so that's like
people work at Beast Games.
There's a lot of developers at the moment. We like to do it in-house. We talked about like, okay, outsourcing versus in-house, and we're kind of playing both sides of it. Like, we understand we need to outsource some work, but we want to have a few developers in-house that are working on this 24/7. So that's how that company is built right now. And so that's a big focus. Like, we think software and games is not only organic to what Jimmy and some of our 8 other creators do, but it's something that, like, we actually think engages the community as a whole. Like, Finger on the App was like a cultural moment on the internet, right? It was like something that it lasted 72 hours. It was something people were talking about for 3 straight days on Twitter, hoping that, the games that we launch in the future will do the same thing. And so that's one thing we're focused on. Mr. Beast Burger is something we're continually focused on. It wasn't just a marketing stunt to launch a restaurant. Like, we now have over 300 locations. We'll probably get to 600 in the next 30 to 60 days. And we'll continue to launch new items. We have some cool licensing collaborations that are coming up in the future. And we're just going to continue to build on top of what we already have with Mr. Beast. And it also, like, the one interesting thing about virtual dining for us is it's also like an instant touch point. Whereas, like, someone can order a t-shirt on shopmrbeast.com and they get it 2 to 4 days later, or we can sell a product and they can have it 30 minutes later through a virtual restaurant. So it's also like an instant touch point to our audience for products, which is something that we really thought about early on, of like, okay, where does this go outside of just like selling hamburgers? Right. And so that's like something we've taken into account as well. And we'll announce a few different things that we're doing with Mr. Beast Burger throughout this year.
Are you following NBA Top Shot in this whole like world of buying virtual NBA game moments at all?
I know what you're talking about. I haven't been too involved in it.
I haven't really either. My friends are flipping it for money right now and I'm getting FOMO from it. But what I think of is like, is there a way, like, when do digital goods also enter the creator? Like, there's this world for digital goods of something exclusive where only a finite quantity is being made of Mr. Beast that gives you that instant satisfaction, but also, plays into this Pokemon craze right now and trading card craze.
We'll get there. There's definitely some ideas on the board that we've been discussing. We'll get to virtual goods. We've also like quietly been in the virtual goods market for the last three years through Minecraft servers, Roblox games. Preston and I sell, like, we have a development company that sells maps and cosmetic items on the Minecraft marketplace. And so we've been in that business for a while. So we're pretty heavily in the digital goods within video games. Now it's like, how do we step outside of just video games and start working on other maybe decentralized? We'll see.
I see a smile there that I think there's more than you're telling me, but I'm not going to press. So
I can't give away too much. Like, we still remember when these things launch, they still have to be like, holy shit moments, right? That's like what we're always going for.
I mean, Finger on the App was a holy shit moment. Like I remember watching the live feed at the end of those people holding their finger on the game and like rooting for them. It's so cool that because if that launches in isolation, it doesn't get that distribution, right?
Agreed. I mean, we saw that with Mr. Beast Burger too. I think it was, at least for a lot of creators I spoke with, they were just kind of like, how? Like we understand it, but how? Like, how did you do 300 locations at launch without anyone knowing anything? It's just like one of those moments. And that's what we want for every single drop. At least for Mr. Beast and for some of our other clients. Like we always want that, like, holy shit, how did they pull this off moment?
Right. And then also probably get a lot of client emails that day of people who maybe want to work with Night Media now. So like, how do you manage, you said you want to keep it intentionally small. How do you manage adding new talent as you continue to add? Like when I see Finger on the App and I'm a talent, I want to work with the agency. I want to work with a company that is doing Finger on the App, is doing Mr. Beast Burgers. Like, how do you manage keeping it tight?
Yeah, I mean, we're like, again, it goes back to those like 5 pillars of what do we look for, which becomes incredibly important as we identify all talent. I think we have multiple talent managers within Night Media now. So they also have like certain things that they specifically look for. But we've always been incredibly picky. I don't think that'll ever change, just with the nature of how we work with clients and how in the weeds we get on every like facet of their business. It's just like, it's going to just continue to be like that. So we're always going to be picky with who we bring on. I think we have our like, if we could, we would sign these 2 people. Like we definitely have a board like that of like, hey, who are like 2 people we'd like to work with, but it really doesn't go outside of that. We don't have signing meetings.
Does it
We
ever
don't
get
really.
ugly? Like, let's say Ian's represented by a different agent or different manager. I'm not happy with my manager. I want Reed to manage me. I'm one of the 2 people on your board. It has to get a little testy at some point, right?
It hasn't yet. We have such good relationships with some of the talent managers that represent like the bigger clients on YouTube. I mean, we would never like overstep and try and represent those people. So I just think like I have a really good relationship with a few big managers. They have a really good lane. We collaborate with them. I think the agent world is a little bit more like, I want to steal their clients. They're trying to steal our clients. To me, like at least in this management game, it hasn't been like that, at least for me.
When you get into the venture world, what I always have found when I'm talking to founders right now, the biggest obstacle they're facing is distribution. Mm-hmm. It's the number one thing. And where you are positioned is a startup is going to want to talk to Night Media to solve this distribution problem. But where I see the friction in any of these conversations, the amount of equity is always, there's different expectations on different sides, right? Where like a certain, like 1% of a company, 3% of a company sounds insignificant to the creator, but it sounds massive if you're the CEO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've had to deal with that a lot and that 1%, in a lot of cases in a software business is worth a lot of money, right? I mean, like a quarter of 1% was worth a lot of money in Uber and Airbnb and DoorDash. And like, I could just go on and on and on. So 1% could be significant. And you're right. I think a lot of creators look at that and they're like, oh, 1% of this company, it's not worth my time. So I have had to do a lot of educating for at least our clients on, hey, it's actually more about price per share and less about like, oh, you get 1% of the company. It's like, what's the price per share and how big do we think this company could actually become? A lot of them don't look at it that way. And we've done, I think, a decent job of educating them on this whole world. And, up until, 18 months ago, and we wrote a check into Backbone with a lot of our creators, that was the first angel investment I think all of them had ever done. It was the first deal they had looked at and wanted to invest in. And when they looked at the agreement, they were like, I have a very insignificant amount of this company. And I was like, okay, you need to look at this from a different lens. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of education, which is good. I mean, it helps not only them mature as entrepreneurs, but then they're going to have that conversation with their friends who are also content creators. And hopefully it just creates this snowball effect of now creators at least understanding the value of equity in certain businesses.
So in this Backbone deal, for instance, creators are in the round. How do you structure the follow-on promotion, whether it's cash or equity, so that you make sure that the creators are actually promoting this continuously, right?
Yep.
Because in my experience, if I do a deal for SeatGeek and I pay you all up front, I'm going to have a lot less leverage in that conversation.
Yeah.
You know
And
what I'm saying?
I totally agree. The deals are different per company. We usually never commit to any marketing services, by the way, unless the founder goes out of his way and he's like, I not only would love you guys to invest, but I also want these obligations. And then we'll kind of work out that separate deal on a separate form aside from the investment shareholder agreement, whatever that is. We'll work out like a separate deal on, vested equity over 2 years or cash payouts and what they're doing for those services. Very rarely, like you just alluded to, or is like a creator ever paid in full upon signature of a contract. That's just not a thing. And I don't think any smart founder would ever offer that.
Totally. Yeah. No, I see like the value of getting Jimmy and all these guys in the backbone deal. But if I'm the backbone founder, I need to be working on a media plan coming out of this that ensures that not only do we get the splash, but backbone is going to be in front of their audience going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's honestly conversations we're having with Backbone right now of like, what's that deal look like?
Right.
And like, how do you get a lot of these creators that invested more engaged in the company? So it's like, it's something they're having to deal with right now.
Yeah. It's right now the concept. I think more and more startups understand the value of influencers, where influencer marketing used to be this, like when I started doing it, it was mostly viewed as a vanity thing. Like if you were allocating a media budget, you'd say, all right, I'm going to put 50K to influencer and 2 million to TV. And the influencer, so we can check the box on a nice case study to say that we did influencer marketing. We're a new in vogue agency, and it's shifted because of the Honeys of the world, SeatGeek, a lot of these direct response advertisers who went kind of 0 to 100 on the backs of YouTube influencers. Mm-hmm. And that has kind of flipped the paradigm where now you see all these founders who are asking me, how do you work with these influencers and how do you do it? And it's shifted from, all right, this is just a box we're going to check to this is an essential channel for us to grow.
Yeah. It's been great sitting in my seat over the last 5 years, seeing the transition from we don't do influencer marketing, we think it's a waste of money, to this is our biggest advertising channel and we're putting 80% of our resources in influencer this year. So it's been great, at least for us. I know COVID's been hard on everyone. And this is, 2020 was a tough year, I think, all around. But the influencer industry, I would say, probably doubled just because everyone was staying at home. Influencers could still take pictures on Instagram. Some of them could still film gaming videos on YouTube. People were like looking for places to spend money, especially, technology brands like delivery services and things like that. So yeah, it's been great sitting in my seat, kind of finally seeing people come around and understand the value. And I still have conversations with founders and they ask that exact question that you just addressed, is like, okay, we're launching this D2C business. How do we engage influencers, not only get them excited, but like actually find people that want to be involved and promote this business? So it's continually something that everyone's going to have to talk about and figure out what that model is. And there's not a one fits all. But yeah, it's been fun, like being on the negotiation end this last like 18 months.
Yeah. The problem is Mr. Beast is too big now. He has like 30 million views. How do you price 30 million views? Like if you're any of these advertisers, like that is, I don't know, top 5 show on TV, bigger. Like that's the biggest show on TV that you're directly integrating with. And so just to have that conversation at the level investment needed to what it warrants.
Yeah. I mean, you and I had this conversation.
We had this, right? We've done it. And it's just, Mr. Beast was too expensive and he deserved to be. And I said, and it's funny because when we got the email back and we was like, yeah, we're just not gonna be able to make it work. Your initial reaction is always, as a brand, you're just like, fuck. And then I always try to go to good for them. Good for anybody who can turn down like a nice 6-figure check. And like, that's the point of leverage. Like I was talking to this creator MMG recently, and he's a sports creator, really good and kind of similar to Pat McAfee, but a younger version.
Love Pat.
Pat's great. We could get into Pat, but I was like, if ESPN comes up to you, I told this kid and says, I'm going to give you 1.5 million a year, but you can't do any YouTube. You can't do anything else. You're 1.5. You're going to be the lead anchor on SportsCenter. You're going to be on game day. You're going to be out there. And he looked at me and he was like, no chance I'm doing that. And I was like, how fucking awesome is that? That you can look the global sports behemoth in the eyes. You don't have any rights. You don't have any of this shit. And you're going to say, no, I'd rather just continue owning my own shit. Like I have the leverage now. And so that just reminds me. So when I get your email, I was like, good for them. Like we missed like Honey. We talk about it at SeatGeek. Like we missed the boat when we could have gone Mr. Beast before Mr. Beast was $30 million views, Mr. Beast. Trying to jump in now, the check you got to write, it's a fat check.
It's a significant investment, which it should be. And also there's not a lot of videos. Like we post 30 videos a year and we're not putting sponsors on all those videos. So there's not a ton of inventory. So it also gives us more leverage per video to be like, yeah, if it's not up here, like we're not even gonna have a conversation. He kind of priced himself out of the market, to be honest. It's now it's caught up, but early 2020, people were like this, how am I supposed to justify that spend? Like that makes no sense. And I think finally people are realizing like, okay, he is the biggest show on the internet. We want to be a part of it. Whatever we got to pay, we just want to be a part of it. But I mean, in the SeatGeek example, yeah, I mean, it's just at the time, it just didn't work. We were, I don't know, what were we averaging? Like 18, 20 million views a video, maybe a little less.
Yeah. So the funny thing about it, coming up with that amount, like that is such a huge chunk of change when you have a marketing budget that like logically people are always like, you pay X this amount of money. And I'm like, are you just take a second and think about it. Like imagine if you were watching your favorite sitcom. And I always use this analogy, and like the main character turned to the camera and said, this next scene was brought to you by SeatGeek. This next scene was brought to you by Honey. Like, this isn't just like a TV commercial. This is like, you are literally embedded in the content. What would you pay for that? And you're the only ad on the show. And it's the biggest show in the world. Like everyone balks at these YouTube checks. And I'm just like, I don't think you're wrapping your head around if you equated this to TV advertising or any other, you could make an argument that's very mispriced still. And the problem is just 100%. There's not a fluid enough market.
There's not. It hasn't caught up yet. American Idol is probably the best example of a TV show that would build brand integrations into the show. And I remember Ryan Seacrest would always do like the AT&T ad read of like, text this number to AT&T phone and the blah, 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 right? That was like, but I want to know how much AT&T paid for that and how many like organic views or unique views American Idol got throughout a season. And I want to compare that price to like what Jimmy is at right now. Cause I think in terms of like views per episode, like I would imagine American Idol is around that like 20 million per week. Right. So it's like, that's like the comp. I just don't know what that is, but it's going to take a while for that to catch up, to get like the AT&Ts and the Coca-Colas to like actually understand why they should be paying that money directly to these creators instead of still running it to like Friends reruns on TBS.
We always talk about this with a lot of creators where it's like the people who could possibly be bidding against us in this scenario is like the people I can count on my hand. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's only a certain amount of players at the top echelon of YouTube right now that can spend enough money to warrant a Mr. Beast check.
Yeah. And the crazy thing that you said earlier is like this person turned down or would turn down a massive check from ESPN to be like talent on their show. That's not stopping. Like we're just at the beginning of that. I think that Pat McAfee thought that him starting his own show and ESPN not allowing him to do things with them was like terrible. And I think now he's finally like, wait, I'm in the driver's seat. They need me. And I have this like he had 65,000 concurrents yesterday for that like Aaron Rodgers interview. I was like, this is crazy. Like this is not going to slow down. I was like, this show next year could be at 125,000 people every single Tuesday if they have a decent talent on. Now all of a sudden it's like, okay, ESPN's no longer interesting. We have our audience. We own them. We could potentially launch like a paywall system. Maybe we comment games in the future if we can get broadcasting rights. This whole sports thing is going to get, I think, blown wide open. And ESPN's going to have a hard time finding like good anchors because they're just going to do it themselves. He needs to be on College Game Day. That show's getting old. They've done the same shtick 5-10 years now. Like Pat, and I do like, I was a little upset when he had that Jackrabbit shirt on at South Dakota State because I did play at North Dakota State. So he did kind of, upset the people in Fargo, North Dakota, but I don't hold it against him. But like when he's on the show, it's electric. There's no reason why he's not a part of that show.
The question is just, can we give them some fucking rights? Would be awesome. Like people are watching Pat describe plays. You're not even seeing the fucking play. You're watching him describe the plays, and 65,000 people are on.
It'll happen. Some of these leagues are going to have no choice. The NBA has been the best at giving up footage to different YouTube channels and not copyright claiming those, and like understanding the value of the internet and memes. And like the NBA is so far ahead of the other leagues right now that they're hopefully going to catch up, but it's just a matter of time before this rights conversation becomes open of like, do we just give, I mean, what's his name on Twitch? Tim the Tapman does it, right? Yeah. They have that deal with
and
Twitch
Nick
has
Merckx
that deal.
Does it.
Yeah. It's good. This whole game gets blown wide open when Pat has a desk on Sundays at his studio. It's blown wide open.
Well, last question, and I'll let you go. So we talked for about an hour about how great you are and everything you've built and hyped you up. What would be a failure? I don't think people talk about failures enough, where something you worked on that didn't work out like you thought it would.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. It's so funny you ask. I actually launched a company pretty early on. This was like right when I got started with Night Media. And I had this philosophy in 2015 that like, hey, I think that celebrities and influencers can sell their time or sell a portion of their time, like a minute. They could sell 2 minutes, and they could have a face-to-face conversation with like someone like me paying someone like Jamie Foxx, and people would pay a lot of money for that, like a direct Skype conversation. And the company's name was Starlink. And there's articles written about, how I was launching this company called Starlink pretty early on. And we had like Richard Sherman signed up and some of these other people. And for the life of me, I could not get funding for this company. I was young. I was like 25 years old. I had no startup experience. I really didn't have like a CTO. Like I just had this great idea, and it ended up not doing anything. And I wasn't able to get any traction with it. So in that regard, like it was definitely a failure, but to now like see that vision come to life with Cameo and Pear Pop and all this other stuff, it's pretty cool to see. But yeah, I tried to do that early on in 2015 and failed miserably.
Do you get FOMO when you see like Cameo's latest valuation numbers? Or are you past that? You're just like,
not really. Like I'm kind of the person that's like, I'd rather enjoy what I do than just have a lot of money. So it's like, I don't pay too much attention to like how much money other people are making and stuff like that. I actually have no idea it's maybe like $900 billion. Is it like $1 billion, 900 million?
Yeah, it's over. I think they're raising it over $1 billion. They just hired 4 really experienced executives to run that company.
But I bet like I met the founder a while back. Like I think it's been a grind to get there, right? And they've been diluted round after round after round.
They didn't get funding
board,
for a while. Like it took them a long time to really. A lot of people say like they got pitched Cameo and they passed on it because they just didn't get it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of on my own journey, and I'm enjoying every minute of it, and it's incredibly stressful. But like, there's nothing else I'd be doing. Like I'd rather be doing right now. So yeah, I mean. I don't really pay much attention to it, to be honest. I'm just glad that like there's actually a market for that. Cause in 2015, I was so convinced. I was like, I would pay $10,000 to talk to The Rock right now. Right. I was so convinced that people would pay even $100 to do that kind of stuff. So it's nice to finally see there being some product market fit.
I like that your failure is a $1 billion company that someone else founded. That is a good Michael Scott failure to have. Yeah, I had the most genius idea. It just didn't get traction.
Couldn't execute. A lot of people have great ideas. It's all about execution.
Well, you fell into a pretty good situation yourself.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. It's been a lot of fun. Jimmy is on another level. It's been, I feel like I've been on a train going 1,000 miles an hour for the last 2 years, which I don't sleep very well because there's like always like questions being asked, but I'll look back like on this time probably in a decade and I'll be like, man, that was so much fun.
All right. Thanks for listening. Here's a quick outro of my main takeaway. I think Reed's point on access, specifically that talent and talent management gives him and the firm access to bigger and more lucrative businesses, is super interesting. For them, it's owned and operated brands and venture capital. And since these creators have distribution, they can get their message out there. They have leverage in both of these industries. And that is what Reed and Knight Media is betting on. Again, thanks for listening. Please rate and subscribe. I read every single review. See you next week.